All right, so I'm excited today because I have an amazing talent on the show, and he's going to give us some insights like we've never had on this show before. He's truly a Renaissance man. His career spans over 50 years. He sold in the hundreds of millions of dollars of art pieces. Think of Monet, Picasso, Rembrandt's, you name it, he's sold it to dealers and individuals all over the world. Probably, I would think, and I'm going to say this for him, but it may not be, but I believe his biggest notable thing that he's ever done in his life, he's helped raise over $100 million for the homeless. He's written a New York Times bestseller. I think it was on the bestsellers list for over 3 years. He made a movie from the book that, you can still see it on Netflix today. It's unbelievable, the same kind of difference as me. A wonderful friend and an incredible human being. It's Ron Hall, and he's going to be with us today, and we're going to talk in just a little bit. But because of Ron, when I look at his career and what he's been able to accomplish throughout his career, it just inspires me because he took amazing risk, and you're gonna hear some of these stories of risk and taking every penny he had, which wasn't much at the time, but in believing in what he could accomplish and he could do, and taking that and taking his first piece of art and leveraging everything to sell that piece because he believed he could do it. We're going to meet my dear friend, Ron Hall. Ron, welcome. Thank you so much for being part of this today because it's, I don't know. I believe what you've done throughout your career is so fascinating. And I think everybody out there, you have something to teach them, right? These little nuggets that are going to be so important today. Maybe teach them, don't do this. No, but wonderful to have you.
I have to say I was a little bit concerned when you asked me to be on your show because for some reason I thought you were still doing cheaters.
Thanks, Ron. I appreciate that. Yeah, I would have. You would have been a good fit for that show. I'm just kidding.
No, actually,
I appreciate it.
I'm thrilled to be here. Always in the presence of the great Tommy Habeeb. I love it. Love it. Enjoy your and Claudia's company immensely when we can all get together. So.
It's so much fun.
So you've already heard all these stories. You just want me to tell everybody else now.
Yeah, because that's the thing. Your career has been so fascinating. And I do learn something new every time we talk because you throw these new nuggets in. And as I remember you're telling me this story about when you were working as a banker and you took this massive chance and you were married.
Yes.
And so
newly married.
Newly
Yes.
married. And you go, honey, yes, I'm bringing home money from the bank and this is great, but I'm going to risk it all now. How did that go over?
Not well. I luckily stayed married after that, but I graduated from TCU with an MBA in 1971 and was hired as an investment banker by the First National Bank of Fort Worth. I was a municipal bond trader. I was making $600 a month. I was really proud of that. Coming from nothing I'd grown up so poor I couldn't even pay attention. And all of a sudden I'm making $600 a month.
All right.
So they asked me, or told me, to go to Houston, Texas, in one of the bank cars. They furnished a car for me to deliver a bid on some $50 million worth of water and sewer bonds for the city of Houston.
Wow.
And in those days, we didn't have computers. We didn't even have cell phones. we had a little handheld adding machine, and we figured our bids on those. So we were trying to win these bonds because we were going to resell them and make money on them.
Oh, okay.
So obviously so I had to drive to Houston to present this bid to the city council. And I arrived there early and had a couple of hours to spend before I went there. And I happened to notice that the Houston Fine Art Museum was next door or close by to where we were delivering the bids. So I thought, well, I've never been in an art museum before. I'd never taken an art course. I didn't know Rembrandt from a Jackson Pollock. It made no difference to me. But I thought, well, I could either go to a bar and have a couple of drinks and maybe beat a fraternity brother, or I can just go here into the museum and maybe learn something new. So I walked in the museum and I looked around, and all of a sudden I was just overwhelmed with the beauty of the things that I saw in this museum. And I started kicking myself. Why didn't I ever take an art course?
Wow.
And I didn't take an art course is because my brother took art in high school, and my dad made such fun of him for taking art. What a stupid thing to do, to study art when you got to go out and make money. So, and I remembered his chastising my brother and making fun of him, so I never took an art course. But anyway, on that day, I was overwhelmed with the beauty, and I started making notes on all the things that I loved. And I wrote down names like I had grown up on a ranch, so I loved the Remingtons and Russells of the Western art world. So I wrote down their names that I'd never heard of before, and I wrote down names. I even got to the Impressionist department, and I saw Claude Monet paintings, and I thought they were beautiful, and I wrote them down. And
How old were you at this point?
Van Gogh. At that time, I was 26 years old.
Okay.
And so I wrote these names down, and then I went back to the front desk, and I asked the lady, I said, I'm sorry, I've never been in here before, but I just wonder, I wrote down some names of things I like. Are any of these things for sale? And she kind of looked, what kind of idiot are you? She said, no, this is a museum. And I said, well, I don't understand. If I wanted to buy something like this, how would I find out where to buy it? And she said, well, here, I'm going to give you a suggestion. Make an appointment with our library and come back on, whenever you can. And you can go in there and research all the auction records from Sotheby's and Christie's in New York and London and these places. And you can find out what things like these sell for. And I said, well, I live in Fort Worth, Texas, and I don't know of a museum. She said, well, there's the Amon Carter Museum there. And they're friends of ours. Just go in and make an appointment for the museum. So I did. I made an appointment with the museum, and I found out the things that I liked, that at $600 a month, I would have to work 1,000 years to be able to afford one of those. And I thought, well, this is not likely that I'm going to own one of these paintings. But so I was back in Houston the next week, delivering more bids for more bonds. And I walked into a gallery that was my hotel, and they were having a show of Leroy Neiman prints. And so I asked the guy, I said, well, how much are these? And he said, oh, this is $350. And I said, wow, it's beautiful, because we had just bought a little house, tiny little home right across from Rivercrest Country Club in Fort Worth on Crestline Road, and we had painted it ourselves, yellow and green, put all the house beautiful colors of the year. And this was a yellow and green print of a horse race by Leroy Neiman, and I thought it would go perfectly in any room in the house. So
Sure.
We didn't own a stick of art, so I just said, okay, I don't have $350. And he said, well, give me $50 down, and you can pay it out $50 a month, for the next 6 months.
Wow.
And so I did. That was my first purchase, was a $350 painting. So I walked down the street to another art gallery, and the guy I called him Faux French Frank, because he was a Texan that thought he was French because he wore a beret and a little scarf, a little ascot, and he tried to speak with a false French accent. But he was saying, oh, monsieur, you look so nice, so handsome. Come here and let me show you some art. What do you collect? I said, well, I collect Leroy Neiman. So that was like 2 hours earlier.
Yeah.
He said, oh, well, he's not a very good artist. Let me show you some good art here. So by the next hour, he had convinced me to buy a painting for $3,500, which was
Oh my gosh.
more, yeah, which was, yes, 3,500. That was more than half of my annual salary. And I told him, I don't have $3,500. I only make $600 a month. And he said, but do you work for a bank? I said, yes. He said, are you a young officer? I said, yes, I am. He said, well, let me tell you, all young officers have a line of credit that you don't know about yet. Just write me a check for $3,500. Go back to your bank, and if they don't loan you the money to cover the check, he said, next time you're in town, just bring the painting back. I said, okay, that
Oh
works.
my gosh.
So I went back to the bank, and one of my friends that I'd been in grad school with was a loan officer. So I went down and showed him a photograph of the painting. I said, I just bought this for $3,500, and I need to borrow $3,500 to pay for it. He said, well, first of all, we don't make 100% loans on anything. Secondly, we don't loan money on art. And third, he said, I don't know, how you propose to pay this back on $600 a month. And I said, well, I don't know any answers to those questions either, but he told me I could make a lot of money on this painting. And so I went home, and I remembered that my wife's father had given her 50 shares of Ford for a graduation present from college, and she kept it in her Tri-Delta lunchbox at the top of the closet. So without her knowing this, I sneaked the lunchbox out and opened it, and I grabbed 50 shares of Ford out of the thing, and I went back and I pledged it, which was worth less than $2,000 at the time, but that covered half the note. And so he loaned me the money, and he said, I'm going to tell you right now, if you don't pay this back in 90 days, it's going to cost 2 jobs, and that's being mine and yours. So this is it. You got to pay this back. I started trying to sell this painting, which was a painting of Texas bluebonnets in the spring. It was a 40-inch painting by what I thought was a famous artist named Robert Wood. And he told me, he said, as a banker, every banker in Texas will want to own this painting. Just start asking all your banker friends. Well,
How much did he say you could sell it for?
He thought I could sell it for $6,500, almost double the money. So anyway, I started calling all my banker friends, and nobody wanted to buy it. And so I'm getting down to, I have about 2 weeks left to sell this painting and pay off the note, and I had no prospects to do it. So I called my faux French Frank guy back in Houston, and I said, can I get my money back? I said, I can't sell this, and I'm going to lose my job if I don't sell it. He said, where have all you tried? I said, I've tried everybody. He said, have you tried the Wall Street Journal? I said, no. He said, hey, listen, for like $5 a week, you can run a 1 or 2 line ad in the classified ads of the Wall Street Journal, and just try it. So I took a little 2-line ad, bluebonnet painting for sale, $6,500, this telephone number. And I get one phone call from a guy in Austin, and he says, I really like that artist, and I think I like this subject. He said, can you bring it down to Austin to let me see it? And I said, no, as a matter of fact, I can't. I can't get off to do that. And he said, well, would you put it on the bus? And I said, put it on the bus? He said, yeah, just wrap it in some cardboard and take it down to the Greyhound bus station, and I'll pick it up here in Austin. So I did. I wrapped it in cardboard. I took it to the Greyhound bus station. They stuck it down in the luggage compartment. It had suitcases on top and everything. And I went back and told my wife, she said, where's the painting? It was hanging in our living room. And I said, well, I just put it on the bus. You put it on the bus? Yes. Wait a second. Do you have insurance on this painting? No. I mean, are you crazy? I said, maybe.
Gosh.
He received the painting, oddly enough, and surprisingly in good condition. So he opened and he called me and he said, young man, you and I both know this painting ain't worth no $6,500. I said, well, tell me what it's worth then. He said, well, the most I'm willing to pay for this is $5,500. I said, bingo!
Boom.
I was in business. So
Wow.
I had made $2,000 on my first purchase, and which was 3 times my monthly salary. And I thought, I'm going to keep doing this. So I just kept rolling the dice and rolling the dice and rolling the dice. And that was my ground zero for getting started.
So it's fascinating that this guy in Houston actually gave you a great deal on this painting. I guess a painting's only worth what somebody will pay for it.
Exactly.
Yeah. So why didn't he advertise in the Wall Street Journal and do those kind of things?
Well, he probably already had.
You got the smart one guy in
and
Austin.
It hadn't worked for him.
Wow. So did you keep getting art from him?
I did, yeah. He told me, he said, well, as you're traveling around the country for your bank, he said, do you like quail hunting? And I said, I love quail hunting. And he said, okay. He said, pretend you're a quail dog, a bird dog. He said, you go in, you sniff out every back room of every gallery that you go into. He says there's either the gallery's you're gonna have something they want, or you're gonna have something, or they're gonna have something you want. And he said, any gallery you walk into, you can make money. And I said, okay. So
Wow.
I started walking in art galleries and looking for backroom deals. And again, anytime that they offered me a deal to sell me, I would say, well, you know, I'm in this business, and I don't pay anything before 90 days. I get
Smart.
90 days on consignment, then I pay in cash in full at the end of 90 days. And they all agreed, and so that's how I got started. And it was that I made my first big deal a couple of years later that allowed me to leave banking entirely, and because I began making more than the president of the bank.
When you walked into that museum the first time and you fell in love.
Mm-hmm.
You saw
Passion.
things.
Became a passion.
Yeah, you saw things that you had never seen before.
That's right.
And, 90% of us, I'm sure me, I would have been at the bar with my friends and having drinks. But something drove you to that museum.
I think my friend was working that day. Or I would have been there probably.
Yeah, but that was life-changing, that moment,
Yes.
and you seized upon it. And that's the thing.
Well,
Are there people that have those moments that they don't seize upon?
See, I see these golf clubs behind me, and I see people play golf. I started loving art so much that I would spend my weekends going to art galleries or museums and learning everything I could about it. And it was so exciting to me to be able to learn, because I'd never felt very smart, even though I had an MBA. You know, I'd grown up really in poverty. So this all of a sudden was giving me a new identity. When my friends that went fishing and played golf all the time, when I could talk about art, they thought it was fascinating, especially the wives thought it was fascinating.
See,
and I liked talking to the
So
ladies.
that's your true ploy,
Yes.
to talk to the women.
So anyway, so I started, we took some vacations to visit, driving vacation, we'd visit art. And we went to Santa Fe, New Mexico, where I heard there was a lot of art. And I met an art dealer there who was a very famous art dealer at the time, named Margaret Jameson. And she was an older lady, and she told me, she said, I like you, young man, and there is a painting I know that's for sale in Puerto Rico that you could make some money on. And
Wow.
so she wrote the man's name on a piece of paper, a napkin. We were having dinner at a restaurant, and his name was Will Crowfoot, and he was a Crow Indian from Montana, and his parents had been given a wedding present by Charlie Russell. His parents were Indians, and Charlie Russell painted his parents.
Wow.
And Charlie Russell gave them a painting, and it had been in their family since 1920.
Now, Charlie Russell, famous painter.
the famous Western,
Sorry, I should
famous
know that.
Western painter,
okay.
Charles Russell. He and Frederick Remington were the two most famous Western artists. And so I called this guy he had retired from Montana and was living in San Juan, Puerto Rico. And I told him, I said, I'm very interested in this painting Margaret Jameson told me about. And he sent me a photograph of it. And I said, yes. I said, how much do you want for it? He said, $28,000. Well, I mean, I was doing pretty well then, because they had raised me from from $600 a month to $1,000 a month. So I was just $27,000 short of being able to buy this painting that month. And I said, I'm a very busy executive at the bank.
Yes.
And I'd love to see the painting. Would you consider getting on a plane and bringing it to me in Fort Worth, Texas? he said, yeah, I've never been to Texas, so I will do that. So I picked him up at the airport and gave him a bottle of Texas barbecue sauce and took him to eat a big steak dinner. And so he said, okay. I said, all right, I'm going to buy your painting. And he said, okay, you want to just give me a check? And I said, no, I do it this way. I pay in 90 days. You leave the painting with me, and I'll send you $28,000 in 90 days. I didn't have a soul in the world that I could offer this painting to or try.
Oh, my gosh.
So I started trying to sell it, and with about 30 days left, on the time that I had to pay him, and he was already calling me every week. Well, you know where to send the money. I knew where to send it. I just didn't know how I was going to send it.
Yes.
So things were getting critical, but I had a dream in the middle of the night one night, and I woke straight up in bed, and I slapped my hands together, and my wife jumped out of bed. She said, what are you doing? I said, I just sold the Russell. She said, what do you mean you just sold the Russell? Just go back to sleep. I said, no, I had a dream. I'm supposed to go to Hollywood in the morning, to Beverly Hills.
Oh, my God.
And so the next morning, I go to the airport and buy a ticket to Los Angeles. And on the way there, I called the bank and left a message with my secretary. I'm not feeling well today. I don't think I'm going to be able to make it to work. Oh, I'm so sorry. I hope you're going to be better. And all of a sudden, boarding now for Los Angeles. And I said, oh, crap. So
trouble.
Anyway, I'm in trouble. But I landed in Los Angeles. They had a company called Rent a Wreck. For $5 a day, you could rent a wreck. It had 4 ball tires and a fourth of a tank of gas.
Yeah.
And it was fenders dented and everything. So I was renting some little wreck. I got a map. I drove straight to Beverly Hills to I parked at the Beverly Wilshire Hotel, walked down Rodeo Drive, walked in the first gallery.
You had no idea where you were going.
No idea. I'd never been to California. Didn't even know. I just heard Rodeo Drive and rich people. But this gallery was owned by a name Robert Peterson, and he owned Peterson Publishing Company. Did Hot Rod magazine, Guns and Ammo, and all these things. And he had an art gallery full of Western art. So I walked in, and the manager was there, and I said, I have this Russell. I had it in my hands. I have this Russell for sale. And he said, how much do you want for it? I said, I want $50,000. And he said, well, I think that's a little bit, but I know someone here in Hollywood that collects these, and he probably will buy it from you. So he wrote down his name and his address on a piece of paper, and he called him and said, I'm going to send a young man from Texas over to show you a Russell. So I found my way over to his little Spanish-style mansion in West Hollywood, and here he opened the door. I'm dressed in a three-piece banker suit. Here's this one-eyed old Jewish guy with a patch on his eye, bald-headed like Yul Brynner, dressed like Liberace, with this, a Western suit made by Nudie, who did all Gene Autry and Roy Rogers clothes, and Dale Evans and all these fancy suits. He was dressed like that, and I opened the door, and he said, Poopsie. And I said, no, I'm Ron Hall. He said, no, you're Poopsie. I said, no, I'm not Poopsie. I am Ron Hall, and I'm from Fort Worth, Texas. And he said, well, call me Snookums. And I said, okay. So I came in, and he was just having his morning Chardonnay at the...
oh, my gosh.
And there was another one-eyed Jewish guy that was sitting next to him at the table, and they were discussing art. So...
wow.
His house was looked like a Ralph Lauren mansion because it was filled with Western Indian blankets and artifacts and Western art and saddles, and I'd never seen it was a museum. And so we sat there for about 3 or 4 hours. I had an afternoon flight back, and finally I said, well, are you going to buy the painting or not? Because we'd already been through 2 bottles of Chardonnay for breakfast. And he said, no. He said, Poopsie, I'm not going to buy it, but I'm going to do you a favor. You just leave it with me, and I'm going to send you the money in 90 days.
That's your ploy. Oh,
and I said,
God.
well, no, 90 days doesn't work for me because I'm on a 90-day. No, I only have 30 days left to pay, and I have to pay or else I'm losing the painting or losing my life because Will Crowfoot was about to scalp me.
Yeah.
And so I I go back, leave the painting with him. I go back to the airport. I call my wife back home, and I said, well, I think I sold the Russell. She said, great. Who'd you sell it to? I said, a guy named Snookums.
She's going, what?
I couldn't even remember his last name. But a guy named Snookums. What? And so I said, she said, how much did you get for it? I said, well, I told him I want $50,000. He didn't argue with me. And she said, well, do you have insurance on it? I said, no. She said, did you get a receipt? I said, no.
Oh,
she said, are you crazy? I said, yes.
What did I do? You just left it with
I left it with him with nothing. A guy I
right
met.
on.
So she said, you go back right now and pick up that painting and bring it home. And I said, honey, I have already turned in my rent-a-wreck, and I'm broke, and I'm coming back home. I got to get on this plane. So we get back home, and she says, all right, call him and get a receipt. Get him to send you a receipt. So I call and call and call, and I finally put a blister on my finger because we had dial phones back then, dialing his number. It was the most painful thing I'd been through in my life. I called him 10, 20 times a day for 30 days.
Did you think I'm in trouble?
I knew I was in trouble. Yeah. I knew I was. I was in deep trouble. So on the 89th day, when I had to pay Will Crowfoot the next day, and I had already lost probably 10 pounds, and that was because my wife had chewed it right out of my butt constantly. And so on the 89th day, he finally answered the phone. And I said, hey, where have you been? He said, Poopsie. I said, don't give me any of this Poopsie crap. Where's my painting? Where's my money? He said, Poopsie, I've been in Hawaii. I said, well, I don't know. I've never been to Hawaii. I just need my money or my painting back. He said, call your bank. I said, I'm at the bank. He said, call the department that handles the incoming wires. I said, well, I never thought about that. So he said, I said, what happened? He said, I wired you the money yesterday.
Oh, my gosh.
So I called down there, and they said, yeah, there's $40,000 sitting in your account. And I said, well, it was supposed to be 50. He said, Poopsie, I don't work for nothing. I had to make moves. So I took the $12,000 profit, and I went home and announced to my wife I was leaving the bank to become a full-time art dealer.
Wow.
And she started crying like a little girl and screaming like she was at a Frankenstein movie. She was so upset.
Do not do that.
She said, what am I going to tell my friends? I said, what do you mean, what are you going to tell your friends? Tell them I sell art. You mean art? You just made vice president, and now I'm going to have to tell my friends you sell paintings? This is the most embarrassing moment of my life.
Oh, my gosh. Don't worry about what anybody else thinks.
That's right. So
do what you love to do.
That's right. So so Poopsie and Snookums formed a partnership, and then it did some of the most extraordinary deals all across America that are crazy.
Right?
From a guy in Beverly Hills selling us a fake Kandinsky painting that we took to auction, and they declared it a fake, and we took it back to him, take it to his front door, and he pulls a .357 Magnum in our face and says, don't ever show your face here at my house again.
Oh, my gosh. What did that cost?
That was a $70,000 painting. And
at least you didn't get stuck the first time. You got a little bit down the path before you got burned by somebody.
Snookums was a little bit smarter than I thought. He figured out a way to get it back. So
good.
So we did. We made some trays. We got it back and ended up making a nice profit on it. But, the .357 Magnum in your face will get your attention.
Really quick. All right, so here's what I'm most excited about.
Okay.
Because as an entrepreneur, as a young business guy I'm going on my own, I'm going to do this thing, right?
No.
Your dad, that's probably was in the back of your mind the whole time. My dad thought this art thing is ridiculous.
Yes.
If you're not a macho guy playing football or whatever.
Oh, no. In fact, my father-in-law was even worse. My father-in-law, I told you earlier just in our friendly conversations here, but I went to TCU. I was so poor that I thought the only chance for me, I didn't think I was smart enough to do anything extraordinary. And but I thought, well, if I just marry a rich girl and I can just go to work for the daddy.
It's supposed to be the other way around.
So Anyway, I ended up marrying the poorest girl at TCU.
Oh my gosh.
But she had told me at one time her daddy was in the oil and gas business, and I
Yes,
thought, wow, this is
Texas.
exactly what I need. But come to find out, he just had a filling station. So
Yeah.
that's a joke. No,
That's
he actually
priceless.
worked for Sun Oil, but he was not wealthy. But he was from the old West Texas school, a man, the only I guess, respectable profession for a man is a West Texas high school football coach, and you had to wear a flat top or a burr haircut, and you had to wear your gimme ball caps and boots.
Yeah.
And I had these Italian loafers with some little strings on them that he wanted to cut them off with his pocket knife, and he
And you had the hair. I see.
and I
you
had
got
the hair, and
locks.
he wanted me to play golf with him at his country club, and he put some John Deere green hat on me, a baseball cap, and he kind of tried to work it down over my hair like he was juicing a lime for a margarita. And
He
so
goes, my daughter's boyfriend is gonna, or what husband?
he's a husband, yes.
At that point, we're gonna make a man out of him.
That's what he was going to, yeah.
Oh my gosh! All right, so were you able to go back to your pop, and how did he think of you're dealing with art now?
Okay, so he told me.
And truly, your brother that wanted to do that,
Okay.
and he wouldn't let him.
Shortly after that, I buy a $200,000 house, which was a lot of money
Wow.
in 1976.
Ronnie Ray Hall.
And I bought this big, beautiful mansion, and with its own acre and a half with swimming pool and all 3-car garage and a guest house. And so he came by to see it for the first time, and he said, I don't know what you're doing, but it can't be legal, and you need to stop it right now because I don't want to have to visit you in prison.
That's hysterical.
And I said, Dad, I'm an art dealer. He said, I don't believe you're just dealing in art. I know what dealing means. That word means something totally different.
Wow.
So you're some kind of dealer, but it's not art.
No
He
kidding.
thought I was a drug dealer.
Of course. How do you go from that? And
Yeah.
what was that period of time? How long did it take you to go from $1,000 a month at the bank to buying this
I made $275,000 my first year
in art?
in art in 1976, and that was more than the chairman of the board and the president combined at the bank that I left.
I mean, if that doesn't inspire you and motivate you to do what you love to do, I was around in 1976, and there was, I saw the movie. I think it came out in 1970 something, The Flim Flam Man,
Oh yeah.
and it makes me nervous thinking about what
Well,
you did in those days.
For your enjoyment, and maybe your listeners will have you know, I've just finished a manuscript that I've worked on for 15 years now, and it's about 400 pages. I'm trying to shorten it right now, but it's so rich with all these stories. But I call it the Poopsie Chronicles,
Oh, my gosh.
American Dreams and Fine Art Schemes.
You gotta let me produce that show.
And so this
Please.
book is more about the behind the scenes of big art deals. You'll walk in a museum and you'll see a great Picasso hanging on the wall, and you'll think, I wonder what Picasso was thinking and what he did and why he did it like that. You never think of how in the world did this get to be hanging on the wall in this museum? Who had to screw who had to do who had to got shot, somebody got stabbed in the back, somebody got lied to. I mean, somebody was cheated.
So there's that kind of history behind
Every
art.
painting, and I'm
Really?
part of that history.
Oh my gosh.
And I've got some of the most fascinating stories of where I say the deal is more interesting than the art.
That is so fascinating because I go into these museums,
Yeah.
and that's the last thing I think about.
Yeah,
When truly that's the story.
the story is there.
Is
yeah.
it that rich?
It's rich. Snookums, Barney Goldberg, he was my mentor, and the full French Frank that was also my mentor. He took me to.
These are characters.
He took
Oh
me to
my
Europe for the
God.
first time, and like a show dog, he was leading me around and introducing me to museum directors and
Yeah.
gallery owners all over Europe. And my friend Snookums, he always dressed like Roy Rogers or Dale Evans. He had this crazy. He had a belt buckle about the size of a dinner plate, and it was Indians chasing buffalo with spears, and it was all lined with rubies in the eyes of the buffaloes, and it was crazy the way he dressed. But he always wore these boots, kind of high top boots, and one of his boots on the left boot, he would stuff. He'd probably have in any moment $10,000 to $50,000 in cash stuffed in the top of his boots. And
Why?
on his right boot, he would have a pistol.
Oh my gosh.
So one day, right before I was going to visit him, he got confused with the boots, and he was getting older then, and he pulled the pistol out, not meaning to shoot anything, but shot a hole through his foot, and which was on the gas, into the engine of
Oh,
a
my
6.9 Mercedes. That was one of the first $100,000 cars ever made.
Oh my gosh. What a character.
And but the stories that he and I lived together were just magnificent.
So just the happenstance of these stories and how you got to these places, I guess, proves that no matter where you are, always know your environment, always be nice to people, understand to trust,
Yeah.
and mentors.
You know,
Mentors was huge.
My
for
motto has always been, don't be afraid of the no's. That gets you that much closer to the yes.
you. Boom.
And so I never was, angry at a no, because I knew, but probably the next one or the next one was going to be the yes. And
You have to have what that takes to be able to take all the no's and not just go throwing my hands up.
yeah, you got to be thick-skinned, because I knew I was always right. I knew my prices were good. I knew I had great art, and everybody that was dealing with me said, wow, you have a great eye, and a great eye for value as well.
Yeah.
And I gave my clients great value. And I just bought back recently a painting that I sold for $125,000 a few years ago. I just bought it back for $3 million.
Wow.
And I bought. Did
you do it and say, I'll pay you in 90 days?
No, I paid it right on the spot.
I'm just kidding. Give me
No,
90 days.
they knew my game, but she had other people that bought it.
Yeah.
But
Wow.
then I knew.
Boy, that thing went up in value.
Well, think about this. In 1975, the first year that I was out there on my own in the art world, I took an Andy Warhol in trade, a self-portrait he had done in 1966. It was one of the ugliest things I'd ever seen in my life, and I despised Andy Warhol and thought he was just a hula hoop that was going to fall to the ground before year end. And so I had Julio Larraz, one of the most famous living Latin American artists, but he lives in Miami, an extraordinary talent. That I think he's the best living painter. And he was a guest in my home, and I had become his dealer and representative. And he loved Andy Warhol. And he said, wow, you have an Andy Warhol. And I said, yes, I think it's the ugliest thing I've ever seen. He said, no, I love Andy. Let's make a deal. I said, okay, what kind of deal you make? He said, all right, you give me this painting and I'll give you one of mine. And then one of these days I'll give you one of mine when you see one you like. Well, I gave him the Andy Warhol. And then and my family was glad to get it out of the house. It was bright yellow and neon yellow and green, and it didn't fit in our very traditional home where we had some nice Impressionist paintings. And so 20 years later, 25 years later, after my wife had gone to heaven, and of course that's the book that we wrote, same kind of different as me, that became the #1 New York Times bestseller. So anyway, I went to my artist friend was living in Florence, Italy, actually in Fiesole. He had the residence, had been former residence of the Pope, and it was this magnificent, like 10,000 square foot villa.
Oh my gosh.
And so I go into his living room. I'm going there to spend 5 or 6 months after my wife died, and I go into his villa and I see the Andy Warhol, and I said, "Oh, I'm glad you still have the Andy Warhol." He said, "Yeah." He said, "I want to move back to Miami and buy something, beautiful home in Miami Beach." And he said, "Would you loan me $1 million? I'm about $1 million short to buy it." And I said, "Well, I'm not a banker any longer. Haven't been in years. So no, I'm not going to loan you $1 million. But do you see that Andy Warhol over there that I gave you as a gift in 1975? He said, "Yeah." I said, "I can sell that for $1 million today." And he said, "You can?" And I said, "Yeah, I have a museum in Japan who wants to buy an Andy Warhol self-portrait, and they'll pay $1 million." And I said, "That's the good news." I said, "The bad news is I gave you that painting in 1975, and you were going to give me one of your paintings, and you've never done that. So I guess now we're 50-50 partners on this one." He said, No, that's my painting. I'll give you a painting now. Which one do you want?" I said, "No," because his paintings were worth about $150,000.
Yeah.
And so I paid him $1 million for the painting, and I sold it for $1,000,001 to the Japanese museum. All right, a few years later, the Japanese museum went bankrupt, and now the painting recently sold for $8.5 million.
Oh my gosh.
That I gave as a gift. Now, this is why I'm the dumbest art dealer
Oh my gosh.
that ever lived. But the truth is, I would have never kept it. The first time somebody offered me any amount for it.
Yes.
It had cost me nothing because I had actually taken it in on trade as pure profit against one of his paintings. There was a $12,000 painting, and the people gave me $9,000 plus the Andy Warhol because they didn't like it. Some people in Highland Park here in Dallas.
Oh my gosh.
And so the painting that they gave up, the Andy Warhol, turned out to be worth $8.5 million. The painting that they bought from Julio Larraz for $12,000 turned out to be worth $200,000. So.
Wow. So, as you've been hearing, these stories are unbelievable. These are all, each one of these could be a movie in itself.
Poopsie Chronicles.
It's just incredible. I can't wait for that to come out. Now, what's really interesting, and I talked about it in the opening of the show. So you were this amazingly successful art dealer. You wrote a book. Much more happened. We all kind of know the history of same kind of difference as me because that book was on the number one bestseller for how long?
Well, it was number one just for a couple of weeks, but it was on the top 20 New York Times best-selling books, nonfiction, for 3.5 years.
Yeah, that's just
it sold millions. Yeah, I decided I wanted to be a cowboy and a rancher and just kind of do art a little bit on the side.
Yeah.
And I had taken up the sport of team roping and bought a beautiful ranch on the Brazos River west of Fort Worth. And so I told my wife I wanted to be and move to the ranch. We'd built a fantastic Western movie-style village there on the ranch. And she wasn't ready to live at the ranch. And she said, "Well, I'll compromise and move halfway to Fort Worth." So we moved from Dallas to Fort Worth. And right at the first in our dream home that we had built to house our contemporary art collection mostly, she began to dream. And she had that first night she had a dream that there was a homeless man, and she saw his face in the dream. And she said it was like a verse in Ecclesiastes 9:15, where Solomon wrote, "There was found in the city a certain poor man who was wise, and by his wisdom he saved the city, yet no one knew his name." She said, "Ron, I saw this man in my dreams last night, and I know that I want to go into the inner city of Fort Worth and find this man of my dreams, and I know if I find him, our lives will be different."
Wow.
And so that day, instead of going to the ranch or to my art gallery, which was in Dallas, and my ranch was in west of Fort Worth, I went with her into the inner city. We began walking the streets where all the homeless people lived, under the bridges, the neighborhoods, and we didn't find this homeless man that day, so we stopped and volunteered at an old rundown soup kitchen called the Union Gospel Mission in Fort Worth, and we began serving the evening meal. We'd been there 2 weeks.
And before we get to the exciting part of this story, at this point, did you think your wife had lost her mind?
No,
Did you
because
just
she
believe
was
in the-
she was at TCU on on a academic scholarship, and was one of the smartest people I'd ever known. And she was a very spiritual being, so I didn't
Okay.
question this. Other people would have thought that just hear this story, thought she had lost her mind.
Because as I'm looking at these two stories, when you quit your bank job and started buying art, she
Yeah.
thought, what in the world have you done?
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
I was thinking maybe the same thing happened when she's going, well, there's a guy, a homeless guy we got to find.
Well,
Because that's pretty out there.
I didn't really believe that we would find somebody like that, because I had of the 1,000 people on the streets in Fort Worth, Texas. How do you find one homeless guy?
Were you a philanthropist at that point of any kind? And
A philanthropist? Well, no, but I used to drop a $100 bill in the church offering plate. Is that
I
a
like
philanthropist?
When you did that, you kind of just would drop that $100 bill.
Because when you shake it around before you drop it in the plate, everybody looks, "Ooh, he put a $100 bill in the plate."
You should have been a preacher, I can tell, just by the way you.
So we had been serving the evening meal there for a couple of weeks, and all of a sudden, this giant-looking African-American man who had no shirt on, no shoes, and just some raggedy old unzipped khakis, and he's so unkempt, and he's screaming at the top of his lungs, "I'm going to kill whoever done it! I'm going to kill whoever stole my shoes!" And he starts overturning tables and throwing punches, and it was mass pandemonium in the dining hall. Well, we were standing behind the serving counter, which was stainless steel, but I could feel the fight moving my way.
Yeah.
So I got down on my knees, and like an ostrich, I stuck my head in one of the empty holes where you normally keep pots and pans. But I could still hear all this screaming and cursing and mass pandemonium, and so...
Where was your wife at this point?
Good question. I thought, well, I wondered what happened to Debbie. So I bring my head out, and all of a sudden I look at her, and she's jumping up and down like a cheerleader on the sideline of a football game, and she's saying, "That's him! That's him!" And I raised my head up at the countertop level, and I said,
God.
"That's who?" And she said, "That's the man in my dream." But by then there were probably 20 people in this fight.
Oh, my God.
And I said, "Well, which one is the man in your dream?" She said, "The one who threatened to kill everybody."
Great.
And then she looked down at me, and I'm on my knees on the floor. And she looks down and she said, "And Ron, I believe I heard from God that you have to be his friend and find out if my dream is real." And I shot a look back up at her, and I said, "But Debbie, I was not at that meeting you had with God. And if I'm going to be friends with somebody who wants to kill everybody, I should go talk to God myself."
That's funny.
So that night, I did have a little talk with God. And though I didn't hear an audible voice, I know that I heard the words that being friends with the homeless man is a small price to pay for the forgiveness that I've shown you. And so I asked the guy, but that was standing to me next day, this was later, but right after she told me she wanted me to be friends with him, I asked the guy, a homeless guy that's standing next to me in the serving line, I said, "Who is that crazy man?" He said, "Nobody knows his name. He's been on the streets longer than anybody in Fort Worth." Wow. And most people call him the Lion of the Jungle, but a lot of people just call him Suicide, because messing with suicide is equivalent to committing suicide. The man is dangerous and he'll hurt you. He said, "You need to just stay away from him." And I thought, well, you are a lot smarter than my wife, because you're giving me some good advice, and she tells me I have to be his friend.
Yes.
But anyway, that's where one of the greatest stories of all time came about, and it took me 5 months of pursuing him on a daily basis. I basically gave up my art business and all of that to pursue the man of her dreams. And he became the wisest man I've ever known. And that's why we made the movie that stars Renee Zellweger as my late wife. John Voight plays my father. Greg Kinnear plays me. And Jaimin Hansu played my friend Suicide, who became closer to me than a brother. And even after my wife, he predicted the day that my wife would die, and she died on that day. and he came and spoke at her funeral. He got a standing ovation from more than 1,000 people.
Wow.
And he put out a plea for to people to donate and build a mission of her dreams. And the next day, $500,000 came in to begin construction for the new mission in Fort Worth that the chapel is named after her. But he moved in with me after that, and we lived together for the next 11 years and traveled all across America, helping raise more than $110 million for the homeless, and wrote our book, became the #1 New York Times bestseller. He became a successful artist and a millionaire and a featured speaker at conventions and convention centers all across America, and was getting paid $10,000 a speech.
Wow.
A guy that lived in a dumpster, an ex-con who did not read nor write, never been to school a day in his life, had grown up on a plantation in Louisiana, had been roped and dragged by the Ku Klux Klan for helping a white woman change a flat tire on the plantation when he was 15 years old. And they made him vow he would never again speak to a white woman. Became best friends with a very white angel, I guess, that we called my late wife, Debbie, that had the dream. And he became part of our family. And it's a great, great story. We even went to the White House.
It just shows that you just never know. You just never know who you're speaking to, who you're talking to. You never know who that guy is on the street.
That's true.
That you're walking by and he's
Well, he told
muttering
me,
words
I was very critical of many people on the streets and judged them like I was their judge. And one day he stopped me after I had harshly judged a man that I didn't know his story. Come to find out that the man wasn't drunk at all. He had a stroke, and he became homeless because of the stroke, and had no family in America. He was from Mexico. And he told me one day, we're standing on Main Street in Fort Worth. He said, "What do you see at the end of the street down there, Mr. Ron?" I said, "Well, I see the courthouse." He said, "You sure do." He said, "Let me tell you something, Mr. Ron. That courthouse is full of judges, and God ain't looking for no more of them." He said, "If you're going to walk these streets with me, you come as a servant. That's all God wants, is servants." And he said, "So you leave your judge's robe hanging in your closet at home."
Boy, that's one wise dude.
Yeah, he was wise.
For a guy that never was in school.
Yeah, I'm writing a new book about those things right now that I call Lessons on Living from the Mouth of Suicide.
Wow. I mean, that gives me chills.
It does me too.
You know?
I mean, I can think about him and how he changed my life, and I can just start crying. It was that powerful. Just those years that we lived together, just the two of us against the world.
So you've lived these two extraordinary periods of time in your life.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, we look at them, and one, you've done hundreds of millions of dollars in art. Another one, you've raised over $100 million for the homeless. When you put those up on the scale today, you know, what was worth it? What is something that you can hold on to for the rest of your life? What is the?
You know, it's interesting. I have forgotten more of the deals. That's why I had to write them down, because my life became so consumed of making a difference through my friendship with Denver. And so I forget a lot of those big deals. But right before I met Denver, I was thinking of just taking a break from the art world and being a rancher and a cowboy. And I thought at that point, I've made my legacy. I had just sold the largest and Alexander Calder sculpture, almost 50 feet tall, weighing almost 50,000 pounds. I had just sold that to the president of Microsoft, and it's in downtown Seattle on the waterfront. And I thought, this is my legacy, is having sold this very, very important sculpture. None like this will ever be for sale again. And I thought that was it. And then all of a sudden, a few months later, my wife had a dream about a homeless man that would truly change my life forever. So I tell people today, just joking, but I said, even if I sold the Mona Lisa to the Pope, I would still be known as Denver's friend, a suicide's friend. That's my legacy, is I devoted my life to making a difference in his life and other homeless lives.
Through all your entrepreneurial times and your giving times, helping humanity, that's truly a legacy to be proud of, and to go, that's all anybody could ever want, right? So out of this all, what is your message? What's your message to young guys coming up? And do I stay in my job? Do I go and I become an entrepreneur? Do I build a business? Do I give myself to, helping humanity? What is that, Ron Hall? What would you, if you got on your soapbox? It's just me talking right now.
My father wanted me to be a veterinarian because he had a lot of animals. We lived in a 1 acre just slum, and we had every kind of animal in our backyard, and his vet bills were more than his Social Security check. So he wanted me to become a veterinarian so I could take care of all of his animals. But that was not my passion. My passion was to marry a rich girl, so I set out for that. But I soon learned through all of that my passion was art, and I loved that. So I say that don't listen to your parents when they tell you what to do. You got to follow what's in your heart and what you want to do.
Some of the exciting things you're doing right now are massive, massive deals.
Oh yeah, I'm the biggest art deal in history probably. I'm on the verge of closing right now, a $500 million. It's an extraordinary deal. It's the only Caravaggio painting in existence that he painted on the ceiling of an Italian villa.
Wow!
And it's a collection that's been together since 1600s, never for sale.
It's now for sale.
Yes, we have it under contract.
For $500 million.
A little less, but with all the expenses, it will be over $500 million. Yeah.
Wow! And so, I guess the moral of that is, this is what happens when you have relationships.
Oh yeah,
this
absolutely.
is what got you to be able to handle deals like that, and you have several other ones that are.
Well, you don't want to burn a
deals.
bridge. I looked at myself as an ambassador for art, and I wanted people to love I didn't want to try to sell anybody anything that they didn't want, but I was an ambassador for art, and I never wanted to do just a one-off deal. This is because, every deal that you do leads to the next, and if you leave it with a good, clean reputation and honesty, then you will always be in business.
Those words are so important.
Yeah.
So the guys you're dealing with, like on this, how far back do you go?
On what?
On these current deals, like you do
on the current
thing
deals
with Japan.
Well, these
like
all come
those
about in
relationships.
Japan. Yeah, the relationship. My relationship in Japan, my main relationship, is with a man named Ryokichi. That we were sitting beside each other in 1990 at a Sotheby's auction. One night when he bought the Renoir painting Moulin du Galette for $79 million.
Wow.
And the next night I was sitting by him, and he bought the Van Gogh painting Dr. Gachet for $82 million. And he liked me, and he invited me to Japan. And so we went to Japan, started doing business, and we forged a friendship. He was not buying these for himself. He was a Japanese business facilitator.
I see.
Wonderful, wonderful friend. I speak to him twice a day, almost every day now for years. I'm since 1990, and
Over 30.
Yeah, he taught me to eat sushi.
Back before sushi was cool.
Yeah, that's right. And But yes, that's that kind of relationship. And we've never had a contract between the two of us. It's always been on a handshake.
Wow. And y'all have moved some serious art.
It's very serious. Monet, water lily paintings, Van Goghs, just Rembrandt, anything that you can think of, any big name impressionist artist, we worked on these deals together. And we're working on right now. So, and also, I guess, I need to mention that there's a new company called Artex out of Liechtenstein that I'm on the acquisition committee, where it's going to change the way that art is traded in the world, where any person like you and I can buy into a $100 million masterpiece, like shares of it, 1 share, 2 shares, up to millions of shares, and it will be treated like a stock. It's like owning Apple stock. You can own a $300 million Mona Lisa or something, whatever that is coming for sale.
I mean, that's revolutionary.
It's called Artex, 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 a stock trading company out of Liechtenstein. And so
that's
my newest thing that I'm working on, plus a Broadway play, or not Broadway, but a stage play that will open in London next year on Same Kind of Different as Me. So,
oh my gosh, gosh, what a wonderful time! Thanks so much for sharing with us.
Do
today.
I get paid for overtime?
Don't even
you
think
told me
about it.
We only had 20 minutes. Have we gotten there yet?
No, we're at 18 minutes. But one of the most important things, Ron, that I'm a big dog lover, and I just need everybody to understand how important it is to get your dog spayed and neutered, and let's take care of those furry friends that take care of us. Feed them healthy. Make sure that you give them love and look into their eyes every day, because that's when they're wagging that tail and they gaze in your eyes, that's when you have trust. They think of you as their parent. And we forget about that sometimes. We forget about those little furry friends that give us so much because they're just always there, and we take it for granted. Don't take it for granted. Look into their eyes, gaze in their eyes. Let them see how much you love them, and because they truly give us so much in life. So anyway, thank you guys so much, Ron. I appreciate everything. You were awesome.
Love being here.
Okay, my friend.